Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Habitronistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security-oriented policies to guide the state of Israel. We are a movement of more than 20,000 people, including many reserve officers and operators from all branches of the Israel Defense establishment. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing, as well as many of our previous briefings. It's very important to us to be able to bring you the analysis of this war and really behind the headlines, what is happening. I'm very honored to be joined today by Gil Hoffman, who is the Executive Director of Honest Reporting, which fights for Israel in the international mainstream and social media, and a lecturer on political strategy at Israel's College of Management, and served for 24 years as the chief political correspondent and analyst for the Jerusalem Post, where he is now a regular columnist. The Al Jazeera website recently named him one of the top 100 people positively influencing Jewish life, alongside President Biden and Zelensky and Prime Ministers Sunak and Netanyahu. He was raised in Chicago, graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern University School of Journalism, and served in the IDF spokesperson unit. He's lectured in all major English-speaking countries in the world. That's quite an accomplishment. More than half the Canadian provinces, and recently made history in Hawaii by becoming the first Israel speaker to have lectured in all 50 states. He lives with his family in Jerusalem. Gil, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure being with you, Moshe, here on this rainy day in Jerusalem.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, I believe you're the first Chicagoan to come on this briefing since we started. So it's great to have you. Let's cover a big question to start with, and then we'll get in more details. We know, of course, that this war in Israel is fought on many different fronts. There is the battlefield in Gaza. There's the battlefield up in southern Lebanon, the Houthis, Iran. There's, of course, the diplomatic front, and then there's the media front. Are we winning the war on the media front? What do you think?
I think that we're doing a lot better than we have in the past. I mean, if we weren't making significant progress on the media front, the war would have been over a long time ago without accomplishing any of our goals. The last few wars in Gaza ended after a few days because of tremendous international pressure on Israel to end the war. Now, obviously, this war is very justified, and the world supported us going to war, but it wouldn't be able to last this long if it weren't for the success that there's been on the mainstream and social media battlefields, where the media in this war have looked terrible. And the organizations like Mine Honest Reporting have highlighted it. And I think the IDF has also gone a long way in learning from past mistakes that it made on that media battlefield of not taking it seriously. The spokesman of the Army, Daniel Hagari, I went to a briefing for top English spokespeople, the ones that you're seeing on TV, like Kenrikus, that's part of this organization, and Peter Lerner and Daron Spielman a couple months before the war started. And Hagari says to us, you guys are the hourglass. You're the ones who give us the time to operate on our military battlefield and accomplish our goals of restoring security. And I was just so impressed to see that there was a spokesman of the Army who got that, finally. And because of that, I think that there has been success, and winning on that media battlefield is the key to winning on the military battlefield, which, please God, should happen, but the world is going to need to be patient.
Okay, so walk me through the process, so to speak, of how the media directly impacts Israel's capacity to keep fighting. Meaning, what is the concern? That the media puts out bad reports and suddenly the prime minister calls off the battle? Meaning, how does that, what would be the concern?
The concern would be that there would be pressure from that directly or indirectly from the media on the world leaders, so from President Biden on down and other leaders around the world, because that's what they've done in the past. We have a war now where the media got such egg on their face from their incorrect reporting about what happened at Al Ahly Hospital, and The photographers that we revealed had awareness at various points of what was going on and came in way too early. And the photographers and journalists that we caught helping Hamas and having connections with Hamas, people realize that they can't believe the information coming out of Gaza. And I think that the people who are on this call, who are very involved themselves in social media, just looking down at the names over here in the attendees, 400, wow. I think that you can all pat yourselves on the back because no matter where you live around the world, if you've been active on social media in this war, you've each played a small role in ensuring that the war will continue until Israel's security is restored and please God, hostages home alive and safe.
For sure. I think one of the things that we all know honest reporting for in this past few months is the episode with the photographers in the New York Times. Are you able just to tell that story for us and for those of us that may not be familiar? Because I think it's super important.
Sure. So there are different standards for who can be a photographer, a cameraman, a writer, for the top media organizations around the world, working in Cleveland or Paris than in Gaza. They've clearly lowered their standards because Israel made a decision in the last few wars in Gaza not to let international journalists in unaccompanied from Israel. So, the top journalists from top media outlets around the world have come in embedded for a few hours, and that's it. 2014 war, they were actually let in just like that on their own. But Israel didn't want to be blamed for journalists dying, which we have been anyway, of course. And we wanted to be very careful. So, who has been reporting this war from Gaza? Freelancers that they've hired from Gaza, ordinary people with cell phones, and we've caught them doing some terrible things. We questioned initially, how did some of these journalists know to come into Israel so early? And some of the pictures that they took were very early on that day on October 7th. We didn't have actual knowledge. Did they definitely get embedded by Hamas or be told about it in advance? But over the course of the day, people sent us pictures of some of the photographers we questioned. One together with Yihya Sinwar, Hassan Asliach. He got fired from both CNN and the Associated Press. He would still be working for them if it wasn't for honest reporting. And since then, we revealed a couple of them a video of them bragging about what they did on that day. One said he went into Sderot and he was around where they were kidnapping settler women and apparently killed a dog and broke into a house. And he was laughing about how easy it is right now, telling everybody in Gaza, you got to come in. His pictures, his name is Abu Mustafa, his pictures were in the top 100 pictures of 2023 in the lists of the New York Times and Reuters. He just was highlighted in another thing, 100 days since the war. They put his picture at the top. This is who the world is getting its information from. Somebody who laughs about the murders of 1,200 Jews. And so I'm glad that we've highlighted, I'm glad that we've raised questions that have made people not trust what's coming out of Hamas-controlled Gaza. They can trust what's coming out of here, where they, for the most part, don't have limits.
Okay, so you're a veteran journalist. Explain to me how a world-class media organization lets this happen. Is it laziness? Is there an agenda behind it? Well, what's going on?
Okay, so let me take you back in history all the way to another war in Gaza in August of 2022. We're going way back here, right? Okay, the war breaks out on Friday afternoon. It's August. Saturday night is Tisha B'Av. A lot of top journalists are on vacation in August when their kids are off from school. So there are media outlets that find themselves with no one in Israel, not one. Okay, CNN had no one. And so they called somebody who worked for them 10 years earlier, and he ended up doing okay. The New York Times had no one. So Patrick Kingsley, who once worked for The Guardian, he found the guy that The Guardian had once employed in Gaza. His name is Fadi Hanona, and he started writing about what was going on in Gaza for the New York Times. He was the main guy covering that war that lasted only 2.5 days, in the coverage that Patrick, from his vacation, directed, but not from the country. And so we found out the day after the war, by just looking at the social media of the people who covered the war, that Fadi Hanona had written on his social media that Jews are sons of dogs and he's in favor of killing them like Hitler did, including the elderly and the young. So, I mean, Patrick said that we at Honest Reporting did a better job of vetting than he did, and with that guy, he said. And I said, one guy, how about three? Because earlier that day, I told my team I'm having lunch with the bureau chief of the New York Times. Give me something to talk about. And they found another guy who had praised Hitler on social media, another guy who praised the Har Nof terrorist attack, which was shooting and stabbing and the model for shootings and stabbings in synagogues around the and churches and mosques around the world, Pittsburgh, Poway, Christchurch, Copenhagen. So that's last year. These people, hey, it's terrible. AP hired a guy, Issam Adwan, who had written on social media in English. The other guy was in Arabic. In English, that Israel needs to be annihilated and the Palestinians need to revolt and compared Israelis to Nazis. The New York Times rehired one of those guys that we got fired the year before. They hired a guy who praised Hitler to cover a war that tried to annihilate the Jewish state. So I don't know if they don't care, but they have clearly lower standards when they're hiring freelancers from Gaza.
When you had a whole piece, I believe, on how CNN puts their disclaimers for when the IDF accompanies reporters and whatnot, and they don't do that on the flip side in Gaza. So can you elaborate on that and explain like why the double standard? It can't just be they don't have enough resources, enough reporters in Gaza. Again, it's very clear they have a different standard. You're on mute. You went
Yeah,
on
no,
mute.
I unmuted it. Don't worry. Um, so the in Israel, we have freedom of the press, and you had journalists come from all over the world, parachute into here, um, some with very little knowledge about what's going on over here, um, but some who came in and did a great job. I think that we have to be thankful to Anderson Cooper, who came in from CNN, saw what the Nova Dance Festival went into, where so many kids were murdered there in that bomb shelter, and cried, and presented that to the world. Um, I'm 2 blocks away from the uncle of Hirsch Goldberg, whose parents have gone around the world campaigning for his release in such a beautiful way. Anderson Cooper, he could have, when he interviewed them on live TV, told them, actually have a live, I have a recording video of your son. Instead, he told them when they stopped recording, can I give you a call in a few minutes? And privately showed it to them. That's really being a mensch. He could have surprised them on live TV. So you've had high caliber people that have come here. Whereas in Gaza, um, they have gotten whoever they can get. And I don't know if, in retrospect, how smart a decision it was to not let the journalists come in. But it is what it is, and they do air disclaimers about the soldiers, about the journalists that went into Gaza accompanied by the IDF. I wish they would put some kind of disclaimer about the reports from Gaza to say Hamas controls Gaza. It's a terrorist group, and the journalists have to, if they want to stay alive, report what the Hamas wants them to report.
Okay, let me ask you, in terms of honest reporting's activities in finding the falsehoods or the misinformation, are you able to characterize who those journalists are? Meaning, we've spoken about photographers and journalists, freelancers in Gaza. But looking at all of your kind of monitoring the media, are they typically Palestinian journalists where the issues lie, or they could be any Western journalists from anywhere in the world?
There are no Western journalists in the Gaza except for one in CNN who came in with a Qatar with a relief mission and managed to stay that way.
I'm saying
Um,
beyond the Gaza war.
oh, beyond the Gaza war, we've been covering media from around the world and honest reporting, um, and making sure that we're treated fairly. We're not out to make the journalists more pro-Israel or less pro somebody else, but we're out to make sure they get the facts straight, which I'd like to think that they want to do. But this has been noticed by the enemies of Israel. There have been reports about honest reporting on Hamas TV, Hezbollah TV, Iran's 24-hour propaganda press TV. Um, they aired me on the press TV. They showed me holding my little girl, putting the ballot in the ballot box on election day in order to say we know how to get to your children. It was disgusting. They were trying to intimidate us, and it won't work. We've gotten 8 Hitler and Hamas praising journalists fired around the world over the last since the August 2022 war, including 3 from the New York Times, 2 from AP, and 2 from CNN. And we're restoring deterrence for Israel on the media battlefield.
I can't imagine what that's like to see your picture with a child by the enemies of Israel. Wow. Wow. I hope that is all past and that's no longer a personal concern of yours. And I hope you made a story out of that because I think that's important to tell.
You can see the video on social media, and please check us out on social media. We've gone in 1 year from having 2022 4 million people see our content in social media to in 2023 123 million. I mean, that's where the action is. 75 million at least since between October 7th and the end of the year. Because we got to be reaching out beyond our echo chamber to the young people around the world who want to know what's going on.
Wow. Wow. So that's a good note to all of our viewers who are listening and watching right now. If you haven't heard of Honest Reporting, certainly look them up, look Gil up so you can really follow all of this. So let's talk about the consumers of the media. When these gross errors are put out, or when people see photos coming from Palestinian reporters, do the public recognize these issues? Meaning, do you need to tell the world what's going on, or there's this recognition and they need some type of professional staff in order to call them out?
I wish more would be called out. Our stories have been picked up by media outlets around the world, especially that one about the photographers. But we had a report a week and a half ago about a woman named Jessica Burbank, who is a regular analyst on The Rising, which is a popular show with young people on the Hill. And she said all kinds of disgusting things that the IDF rapes people and social media. That she said that settlers go and rape Palestinians, and she gave absurd numbers that this huge percentage of Palestinians have been sexually assaulted. It was just so far away from the truth. And we highlighted her, and nothing's happened to her. I wrote her editor, who fired some in the past for saying things not nearly as bad. Um, we need to have campaigns out there when we reveal disgusting behavior by journalists around the world, so there'll be consequences because they're not going to do it themselves. Only when there's significant pressure do they take action. And we're not trying to get them fired. We're, as my CEO says, they just shouldn't be covering if they don't like Jews, they shouldn't be covering the Jewish state. They can write a cooking blog, in Japan somewhere.
Sure, and we put the link in the chat here for anyone who wants to take action and help report these things. Let's shift if we can to try to talk about some positive. Are you able to share potentially some news sources that you would recommend for our viewers? Meaning, I'll put this out there. Your column in Jerusalem Post, everyone should check out. But But in addition to that, are there news agencies which you find to be the most favorable and honest in terms of their reporting on what's happening in Israel?
I'm so sorry, Moshe. I don't feel confident nowadays in telling people to go to any media outlet to get accurate information. They have to be careful wherever they go. Look, the Wall Street Journal ain't what it used to be. The Washington Post ain't what it used to be. They've brought in people from around the world that were covering Ukraine a few weeks ago, and they don't know what's going on here, and they're reporting to the world, and they're getting things wrong. Uh, um, I just can't have that on my conscience. But nor do I tell people to stop getting the New York Times at home. I bet out of the 462 people here, more than half are in the New York area, and out of those, half have canceled their subscription to the New York Times. No, you need to read it and tell the world what's wrong. And when you see what's wrong, then email. I've got one of the URLs didn't work there in the chat. Email action@honestreporting.com, and we will get it. We need you to be the eyes and the ears. I have a very small staff. I have only 4 people monitoring the media around the world, and a social media staff of 2. So we rely on people like you when they are watching media outlets around the world and they see something disgusting, or read something online or in print. Send it to us so we'll know.
For sure, that is so important. Okay, what about Israeli media? Do you have these issues with certain Israeli media outlets that you're monitoring and checking? You smile. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Hey, look, we had a rule that in general, we don't follow Israeli media. We follow media from 190 out of 192 countries in the world. The only 2 that we don't are Canada, because there is Honest Reporting Canada, which is a separate organization. And anyway, Canadians who are more polite than other human beings and the rest of the earth require a little bit of a different approach than the non-Canadian people on earth. But Israel, uh, we're not out to correct what's going on here. We're a democracy where the media play a role as being a watchdog for the Israeli government, and we're out to improve how Israel's seen around the world. Now, so when do we end up having to deal with Israeli media? Um, the answer is when Haaretz or another media outlet gets something so wrong and it's parroted around the world. Haaretz reported that the IDF sent helicopters to kill people at the Nova Festival. And the IDF immediately denied that completely, and yet it was picked up all around the world. I still see it. This false accusation that out of the 1,200 people, the majority were killed by the IDF. The Palestinians are saying that day in and day out.
Do you think that was an honest mistake or an agenda?
Uh, there's no doubt that the Haaretz has a very critical agenda of the Israeli government, no matter who's in power. And you have the most right-wing government in Israel's history, even more so. So you got to follow the Israeli media with a grain of salt too. But I do want to uh, take a shout out the Jerusalem Post. They're trying. They're trying to get it right. My wife is the deputy CEO. I worked there for 24 years. I still have a column every other week that I encourage you to see at jpost.com/author/Gil dash Hoffman. Put that in here too. So you can trust that they're at least trying to get it right.
Okay, so honest reporting is very much calling out and policing, monitoring the media. But how do you reframe the conversation and the whole orientation to the media that it's positive messaging getting out and not always having to be behind the curve and having to fight the negative? Is that ever a possibility, or that's just a pipe dream and we're always going to be on the defensive?
Moshe, I don't give up. We got to be doing offense and defense all the time in order to win this war. And everybody's involved. And the slogan of the Israeli water authorities, "Chavala kol tipa," every drop matters. And I mean it. But yeah, we're having an impact, and positively too. I'll give you an example. Today, there were demonstrations that lasted a long time in Gaza of ordinary Gazan citizens protesting against Hamas to end the war and bring back whatever normalcy they had before. We wanted the world to know about that. We put it on Instagram. Um, and I'll give you another example. We have a TikTok video that we put out 2 days ago highlighting the real Gaza. Um, do you know how wealthy parts of Gaza are? People think it's an open air prison because of a media campaign that's completely false. People think all the people there are poor, and it's not true. I have a good friend who was there in Gaza with his unit, and they got intelligence that right by them there's a tunnel entrance, and it ended up being the engine area for a swimming pool. Villa there in Gaza.
Why do you think the international media doesn't want to share that story of Gaza? How does that harm their narrative?
International media has a narrative that Israel is the aggressor and that the Palestinians are the underdog, and it's wrong. We were 22 Arab countries, 57 Muslim countries, one Jewish state that are built out of the ashes of the Holocaust and expulsion from all of those Arab and Muslim countries. We need to be reminding the world of that. That's the true narrative. We need to be reminding the people on college campuses that Jews are the most discriminated against minority in America, and by far. And we are victims in an era when victimhood is something that helps you or PR. We might as well play that game too and embrace our victimhood, but also be strong.
Sure. Gil, thank you so much for joining me. Final question. Many of our viewers are very active on the local level. They write to their newspapers, they communicate with their elected officials. In terms of dealing with their local media, what do you think that the top issue to express when taking an interview or writing an op-ed in terms of the messaging that Israel needs to get out there? Well, what's the top thing they should try to focus on?
Moshe, for the people that care about Israel and all the people here do, October 7th feels like yesterday. Now, our wounds are so open, our hostages aren't home, and our friends and neighbors and colleagues are still there in Gaza fighting. For the rest of the world, ancient history, they don't remember what happened. All they know is that Israel's bombing Gaza and given following numbers that are ridiculous, that trusting the Hamas health department that has no numbers of civilian deaths in Gaza. Every single human being who died since October 7th it was murdered by Israelis, and they believe it. So they need to know, if we're going to use a word I can learn from Harvard, they need to know the context. October 6th, the Biden administration was moving full speed ahead toward a deal with Saudi Arabia that would have ended the Arab-Israeli conflict, except for the allies of Iran and the Palestinians till they get better leaders. And the Palestinians would have been helped tremendously by that deal. That it would have tripled the amount of Gazans coming into work in Israel. Now, we all know what those Gazans who came into work in Israel did on October 7th. But it was supposed to improve their quality of life. And Iran started this war to prevent that deal from happening. And Iran is continuing this to hurt both the Palestinians living in Gaza, the ordinary civilians, and us. And those civilians aren't so innocent either, with 85% of their homes and public buildings had some kind of terror infrastructure in them. That's crazy. The Germans couldn't say we didn't know, and the Hamas controlled Gaza so tightly that nobody there couldn't have known either. And so they have to know we do everything possible to minimize loss of life to civilians. They've done everything possible to maximize loss of life to civilians. Get those messages out to the media outlets around the world, wherever you are. We need all the help that we can get because we're all part of that effort to win on that media battlefield. That's the key to winning on the military battlefield. And all of you can be involved. Please give us any support you can to Honest Reporting for the future. We're a 501c3, and it's honestreporting.com/donate. Thanks so much.
Gil, thank you so much for joining. And we posted all of those links in the chat. We'll get them out also in the follow-up email when we send out the recording. This has been very, very informative. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow is the IDSF Israel Security Summit in Ashkelon, and it will be live streamed in Hebrew. However, Danny Seaman and I will make sure to provide tomorrow during our briefing a review and an update from Ashkelon on all that is unfolding. So thank you so much. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, take care, everyone.